In Second Amendment news, a federal court has put in place an order that deals a blow to New Jersey's concealed weapons restrictions. So even courts in New Jersey are looking at the Second Amendment with a new, renewed light in light of Bruin. A case that said the right test when it comes to restrictions is historical analysis. And a federal court said New Jersey's concealed weapons restrictions go too far, which is, of course, completely unsurprising because New Jersey, of course, tried to do all the restrictions ever and said, maybe not so much with all the restrictions ever. That might be a Second Amendment problem. All right, so let's learn a little bit more about how the law is moving in New Jersey. Second Amendment advocates have scored a significant win when a federal judge ruled that parts of New Jersey's legislation that significantly limited concealed weapons went too far and is plainly unconstitutional. Yeah, not surprising, right? The cases of Heller and McDonald talked about presumptively legal bans in sensitive places, but the phrase sensitive place implies there's such a thing as a non-sensitive place. Otherwise, it's a meaningless distinction. And New Jersey said, okay, basically, like so many places, how about everything is significant? How about all the places are significant? And no, you can't do that. The United States District Judge writing that the court is painfully aware of gun violence, but what the state and legislature ignore and what the empirical evidence fails to address is that the legislation is aimed primarily not those who unlawfully possess, but at law-abiding. Which, yeah, it's like, yeah, this isn't going to really deal with the people who are breaking the law. This is only trying to criminalize those who are trying to behave in a lawful way. So, no, not so much with your keeping it illegal everywhere plan. The ruling, which was issued as a preliminary injunction, which is also a bit of a pleasant surprise because preliminary injunctions are an extraordinary remedy, not entitled to as a matter of right. And you wouldn't think a New Jersey federal court would go out of their way to issue a preliminary injunction when it comes to gun rights. But hey, sometimes you get surprised. So preliminary injunction further limits the enforcement of the law and restrictions. The ruling did note that most of the permitting requirements are consistent with the Second Amendment, which is perhaps debatable. But even this judge found a limit somewhere. So whether or not the judge drew the line in the right places, debatable. The fact that they drew a line at all, though, is somewhat pleasantly surprising when it comes to New Jersey. The ruling comes in response to a lawsuit filed to stop the law from taking effect just days after it was signed. The law, signed into law by the governor, Mr. Murphy, came in response to Bruin. So they wrote a law specifically responding to Bruin. In that decision, the court struck down the law, saying, in doing so, it acknowledged the unconstitutionality of analogous statutes in other cases. So, of course, this is not the first case anywhere that has come under these issues, and other courts looking at this in other states have struck down parts of their statutes for similar reasons, and will strike them down here too. Again, are those lines being drawn in the right place? Debatable. The fact that we have lines at all, encouraging. Tyler Jones, a spokesperson for the government, called the decision yet another misguided and erroneous ruling that allows for proliferation of firearms in places like libraries, parks, and zoos that ought to be free from the dangers of gun violence. I'm not sure that the licensed concealed carry holders are your principal threat when it comes to the gun violence. I think you might have other concerns, but this poorly reasoned decision sends exactly the wrong message as our nation confronts another devastating wave of mass shootings that have taken the lives of many across the country, including the children. Oh my God, we're literally doing, won't someone think of the children? Wow. The emotional manipulation on this is kind of high, just taking note. We know the Attorney General moved to immediately appeal to keep our residents safe from the relentless attack of the gun lobby. Well, their future is probably pretty bright on the Court of Appeals, to be quite honest, because the Court of Appeals is probably likely to say, all the gun restrictions are just super great. Coming from this region of the country, yeah, I think the Court of Appeals is probably going to disagree with this judge, but it's nice someone somewhere is trying. And of course, this will inevitably round up in a Supreme Court decision someday. When that will happen, who knows? But the Supreme Court's going to have to continue reminding the lower courts that they really were serious when they said the Second Amendment was actually a fundamental right and not a lesser second class right. They really meant it when they said that. So further decisions will have to be made. The Supreme Court definitely has to get more involved in this. In the same way they get involved in the First Amendment, for that matter. The Supreme Court, like every year, hears, a handful of First Amendment cases. So why not hear a handful of Second Amendment cases every year? It's not like we're looking, just for Second Amendment cases. Wherever will we find the cases? There's plenty of cases to take. Just start taking them. Maybe they will. We'll find out. Earlier this year, the courts ruled the state cannot enforce its concealed carry gun restrictions at parks, beaches, recreational facilities, casinos, public libraries and museums, restaurants and bars that serve alcohol, and entertainment venues like stadiums and concert halls. Which incidentally, by the way, that's a matter of state level restriction, by the way, just to make that clear. Whether or not private establishments can ban it as a matter of their own private policy is a whole nother set of problems. But the state was just trying to say even they couldn't allow even if they wanted to. So will you be allowed to carry in these places? Well, depends particularly on the place, but at least the government can't make the law. The gun ban at other places have been challenged, including airports, medical facilities, playgrounds, youth sporting zones, and zoos, remain in effect because they've not come forward with strong historical evidence to support the claim the ban should be overturned. Although that's the wrong way around. Incidentally, it puts the burden on the wrong place. Because this is heightened scrutiny, it's the burden of the government. So saying they've not come forward with strong evidence is putting the burden the wrong way around in the legal analysis, but okay. The latest ruling also allows for concealed carry to be allowed at public gatherings, demonstrations, and events that require a permit, as well as reversing bans at zoos and medical facilities, but upholds the ban at playgrounds and sports events. The Attorney General called the decision devastating by saying over and over, the evidence has shown that keeping firearms out of sensitive places will keep our residents safe, and our elected officials pass sensible law to do exactly that. The court now insists we are powerless to protect New Jersey residents and proclaims the Second Amendment requires allowing guns at parks and beaches, in libraries, at public gatherings, in zoos, and even in bars, among other sensitive places. Yeah, they wish they were all sensitive places. They wish they were all sensitive places, but you can't just magically declare all the places to be sensitive. That is not how this works. The Attorney General went on to say they will be appealing immediately. So, that's good news. And also noted the decision allows people to control whether to allow firearms on their own property as a matter of their own private property choices. So they can still ban it as a matter of their private property if they want. So, fine. They're going to appeal. We'll see how it goes. Thus, that brings us to the end of the decision for the moment in New Jersey, a surprising decision in which a district court gave a nuanced consideration. And the New Jersey government said, how about all the places are sensitive? And the government said, we'd like to keep them all banned everywhere. But the judge said, no, not so much, because you can't just declare all the places sensitive. And came out with a fairly expansive ruling. We could obviously disagree with where the judge drew the line. Also, it's notable the judge seems to have put the burden on the wrong party because elevated scrutiny would require the government to put forward the rationale, not the people to put forward the rationale about why it's illegal. The government has to have the rationale about why it's legal. But, at least the judge is trying. The Court of Appeals will almost certainly reverse this. And we are heading, of course, eventually on a collision course to the U.S. Supreme Court, where we will have to decide these issues ever further. So we'll see how that goes. And at least for a moment, that brings us to the end of discussion of this case.